continue Rav Shachter's psak here. We're up to Ochen Nire. However, it seems, says Rav Shachter, it is not only the motivation that brings to these things apostle, it is further possible to speculate that even if the motivation might be pure, it isn't, in other words, it isn't sufficient just to have a pure motivation. It could be that the actual substance of the hanhoga itself is incorrect. Let's say somebody wanted to research, is it okay for a woman to serve as a shliach tzibur for up to Mariv, Kabbalah Shabbos, in other words, the bit before Mariv, right? Yeah. And he looks in Shulchan Aruch Rechaim, the halachas of Kabbalah Shabbos, he doesn't find anything. And therefore, he thinks, well, there it's clear, black on white, by its absence. She'ein kan mania hilchatit.
White on white.
Yeah, he says that clearly there's no halachic objection. If somebody were to come to that conclusion, Toyahu, clearly they would be mistaken. Dilachol she'ela tzrichim lehistakel velodun mikol atzodim umikol ha'habetim. And every shaila needs to be approached and viewed from all perspectives and all sides, and fully contextualized. The Gemara paskins, a woman may not read Kriyas HaTorah because of Kovod HaTzibur. It's a problem of Kovod HaTzibur, which we perhaps will delve into another time, the full understanding of this sugya. Says Rav Shachter, I've already discussed this in my statement, in my article, brackets, as to whether the discussion as to whether women are suitable and qualified to serve as rabbis. You'll find it on the internet and Torah Web, and it was reprinted, etc., etc. The pshat is shekol adam nivra b'tselem elokim, and here he goes off on it's not a tangent, but an interesting foray into the depth of the understanding of what this Kovod HaTzibur issue is. The pshat is, Shekol Adam Nivra B'Tselem Elokim. Everybody is created in the divine image. V'nitztaveinu, and we are commanded, Lishmoir al HaTzelem Hahu Shaloi Lekalkaloi, to preserve the divine element that is within us, the Tzelem Elokim. In brackets, he says, what is the source of this imperative? V'holachto bidrochov, to imitatio Dei, to emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in so doing, we are actually we are preserving the Tzelem Elokim that we have. Lishma Tzelem Hahu Shalei Lekalkaloi. V'chelek mitare Hashem hu Hashem Yisbarach hu keil mistater. Very, very interesting. He says, an essential element of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that he is keil mistater. He is hidden. Now, yes, yeah. Now this, he's really, really going into some very interesting territory, because that is only part of the pasuk. There is another pasuk of it's almost, there is a tension here. On the one hand, Hashem is keil mistater. On the other hand, I forget the exact wording of the end of the pasuk. Elikei Yisrael Moshiach, I think it is. Nevertheless, he is evident through his actions. But he is keil mistater. There is still an element of him. Well, first of all, that is in terms of his essence. We never ever refer to Hashem's essence.
Like in the Megillah, in the Purim.
Correct. But I'm coming at this from it. That is insofar as his actions are concerned. That was hidden through history. You're right. That is the essence of the Purim story. We're talking here about something else. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in essence. And this is clearly not the topic for now, but it is unknowable. He is infinite. He stands outside of the space-time continuum. He created it. He is not in any way, shape, or form knowable to a finite being. Right. But that, he's not referring to that here. He's actually referring in terms of Hashem, the ways, his hanhoga. Va'aleinu linhoig, and therefore it is incumbent upon us to behave kol heichad efshar, as much as is possible, to be ba'almoniyot, to be anonymous. Unakudazu, it just so happens, no coincidences, but I was having a chavrusa just earlier, and we were talking about the posuk in Micha, beautiful, very important posuk, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, almost Seif Nevuah, not quite, but Ma Hashem Alekecha Shoyel Me'imach Kiyim Asois Mishpat Ahavas Chesed V'Hatznei Aleches Im Hashem Alekecha. Hatznei Aleches, Tznius.
Yeah.
Right? Tznius in its essence is not by any means merely about covering elbows or knees or whatever. It is bescheidenheit. It is a quiet, anonymous dignity that is shaykh to the olam hapnim, and the way that we behave and the way that we work. It is a quiet, refined dignity that applies not only to what we do, but also how we do it. And the more that one is able to achieve an aspect, an element, a dimension of tznius in what we do and how we do, to that extent, actually, we are more like HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that sense. For example, I mean, we just had Parshas Yisro, we just had the luchos say Chazal. Why were the luchos, the first set of luchos got broken? They were given in public and they were subject to Ayin Hara. The more that something can be done in B'tznius, the better. And this is, so he makes this point. Unukudazu hachashuva oimedes benigud gomor l'chol hashkofos anshe America. And we can say this, of course, to include any aspect of, and especially today, this was written certainly before this was probably written around about 2013. Today we have social media, where we have moved almost entirely into the shallow, superficial, showy world with zero substance and only perception. Social media, influencers, it's all the Olam HaChitzoin. It is the Olam HaChitzoin on steroids, which has zero substance. The emperor has absolutely no clothes at all. That's even if there is an emperor. It's all fake. It is all fake. There's nothing there. It's a facade. There is absolutely nothing there. And today it's all about, even in his time he was saying, it's all about externalities, perception. How do others perceive me? Publicity. Everybody's interested in publicity. People are prepared to say to a journalist, so write about me whatever you want. Good, bad, as long as you get my picture with you get my name right and you get my picture in, who cares? There's no such thing as bad news, as the saying goes, yeah? And even though sometimes we don't have any choice, and there is sometimes a necessity to do things in the public sphere. There is a concept of a king, a Rosh Memshala, Nasi Kehila, Shliach Tzibur. But he is almost saying that is regrettable. That is, we have no choice. We need to have some aspect of religious life has to be, there are some roles which are sadly public. We don't have a choice. We need a melech, and we find by HaKadosh Baruch Hu also in brackets that sometimes Hashem is Yotze Migidroi, and there is a concept of Gilui Shechina and Neis, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually prefers Teva. You know that? It's another, for various reasons, but he's including another dimension. Why? Because he can hide. He can hide in plain sight, but he can hide.
But really the hiding is not so much hiding as it is like showing it's showing the right thing, so to speak, or not preventing to showing the thing which is empty. I don't know. It feels like,
well, he's talking about the balance or the tension between Nes and Teva. Okay. Those are the two modalities with which HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through which he manifests. And the question is, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't think he makes reference to it. I looked ahead. He doesn't. But there's a. Go on.
But he would say then it's about proportions. That both things in a certain situation have to be shown, so it must be in balance, because nace is also something which would sometimes be perceived, but that's a minority, right? It's like a balance of two different aspects.
I think here he's talking less about balance rather than identifying which of those is preferred.
Right. Okay.
That's what he's saying.
Okay.
You're right. There is the aspect of balance, and Hashem sometimes does. In fact, that was that's the idea. Yitzias Mitzrayim, right? He says, right, guys, once and for all, I am going to show you that I exist, that I'm the boss, I'm in charge,
right.
I'm involved, and now remember this at every turn. Tefillin, tzitzis, mezuzah, Haggadah, matzah, because I'm not going to do this every day. I don't want to do this every day. The purpose of this world is for me to hide and you to appreciate me through Teva. That is actually the tachlis.
Right. If we are B'Tselem Elokim, then we should also function that way, that there are sometimes moments where really the other side needs to be shown.
Possibly. But why are you stressing that? He's trying to focus on the hidden side. This is the whole point he's trying to make here. That, I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't do Nisim, so I'm not sure what else there is. I suppose what you, maybe this is what you're meaning is that occasionally one has to go public. That's what he's saying. But he's saying this as, it's almost regrettable.
Yeah.
What can we do? We need a Shliach Tzibur. You need that. It requires a nasi of a kehila or a melech or a. And you actually, interesting. You see this. I mean, this may play a little bit into the whether having a melech at all was desirable. Don't forget. It was just a ha'ara, a small ha'ara. If you think about our Gedolim, by the way, if you really think about our real Gedolim, they absolutely, utterly, genuinely hated anything in the public eye. Hated it with a passion. All they wanted to do, that doesn't mean they took responsibility for Klal Yisrael, but they did so. Think about you think about all of any real Godel. And in fact, if they liked the publicity, it was almost a litmus test. There's no way that man has gadlus. You take any god, it doesn't matter, from any chug, and if they do like the publicity and the thing, it's bad news. They will never be one of our gedolim. Not a single one that I can think of that was universally recognized as a godel b'Yisrael. They would run from, have nothing to do with, would genuinely hate anything to do with the public square, the public stage, the public persona. Because it's the antithesis of Yiddishkeit. Sometimes it's you don't have a choice. Sometimes the public statements and things have to be made, but it's when Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zichet Tzadik Livracha, when he was nifta and 300,000 people showed up, and the Israeli press, the secular press, contacted from Haredi journalists or spokesperson and said, "Who is this guy?" Mm-hmm. I mean, his yeshiva, Kol Torah, was a medium-sized yeshiva of many. Where does he come from? The Steipler. The Chazon Ish held no position, ever. Didn't hold a position. The concept of having, he wasn't a Rav, he was just the Posek. Rav Moshe Feinstein barely get a minyan to his Gemara Shiurim. And it didn't bother him. He was still the Posek. And that's why you always... I have no doubt that the Lubavitcher Rebbe did not relish the publicity.
Right,
I'm not a Chabadnik, and I don't know a huge amount about him, other than that he was a Godel B'Torah. But I have no doubt that he did what he felt was needed to be done for Klal Yisrael. Yeah, that was his sole motivating. I have no doubt for a second. And that's a really important point to make. It's really, really important. Tznius in its real meaning, which means Bescheidenheit, sagt man. Yeah, that's what it is. Al ze omra Torah, but sometimes we have no choice. Al ze omra Torah, same tosim alecha melech. Al ze dor shvat hanoim melech v'loi malka. We haven't really gone into this sugya yet. We probably should do in the maybe next week. Melech v'loi malka. Shemaspik ma shegvorim tzrichim lif'omim lispasher al midas hatznius shelehem. It is bad enough that men sometimes have to compromise on their requirements of tznius and to perform roles in the public square, in the public space. But melech v'loi malka. Ein lonu litvoya me'anoshim sheyispashu af hein al hatznius shelehem. There is no call to ask and demand from women that they should dispense with their tznius to perform a public role. And this has zero. You hear the way he's reframed the whole. It's actually quite smart. He doesn't need my Haskam, of course. But what he's done is, do you realize what he's done? He's turned it all on its head. He's demonstrated the shallow, superficial world of everything that is public, and demonstrated how the Tselem Elokim is the preservation of the dignity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and our obligation to emulate him manifests in being like him, in that to operate with quiet dignity privately. And therefore, even though sometimes there may be compromises need to be made, so that Nebuch, we need a Shliach Tzibur, but there was no demand to demand such compromises on the part of women, so that their dignity remains intact. Melech v'loi malka. He's flipped it right round. Rather than, what will you read? Where is the woman's voice in the public space? And the answer should be, thankfully, absent. It is not demanded of them to be there. Not, I want to be there. Want to be there. None of our Gedolim wanted. That's the point. That's exactly the point. It's very, very, it's a subtle hashkafic point, but it's really important. I have not seen this point made elsewhere. It's the way that he does it is very not very smart, but also very true. Okay. The Ein Hadover Kosher Klal, he says, don't connect this to the fact that Shebiyomenu Yesh Etzleinu Noshim Melumodos Shalom Des Barama Gevaya Yosem Hashem Mekedem. Don't equate it with the fact, this has nothing to do with the fact that today's women are more educated, and remember he's writing from a perspective of, Rosh Hashiva Yeshiva University, where they are taught Gemara and all that stuff. The Chashivas HaTznius Bevadai Adayin Bimkoima Oimedes. The demands of Tznius have not changed. Leave out these brackets here. Ubevadai Imein Shama B'Minyan Gever Sheyedea Likros BaTorah. Of course the halacha is, if in the Minyan there is no man that knows how to read the Torah, of course, we ought ideally to ask the woman to read. The Gemara says it's not right. It's mitam kovod hatzibur. Why? From the fact that we force a woman to compromise on her own midah of tznius and velikra Torah barabim, that demonstrates that in this tzibur there are no men that are able to read the Torah. That's a bizayin. That's covered. That is a bizayin and covered at tzibur, and that's what the Gemara means. Brackets. It's not going to help the fact that the tzibur will be meichel on their covered. Okay, this is a halachic thing. He says the peidah is mitzad ha'isha. It's in bold there. Okay, fine. Weiter. And here he goes on to the next point, which again is really a central point to this day, and this point still stands. When we are talking about upending and changing the way we have done things for so many hundreds, for the whole, always, unless and until we have Gedolim of stature, Poskim, a Reb Moshe, whoever, each in their own doyer, that would come out in support of it, until that happens, then having some junior professors, rabbis, whoever they are, actually having the arrogance, one has to say, to think that you can just overturn that is itself unacceptable. And this is what he says now. Even if you were able to, from a learned, scholarly basis, to be able to demonstrate that perhaps it's halachically okay. None of the universal gedolim or poskim have agreed to this. Val Kuntras Piskei Halachas Anal, and the Kuntras that was given out of so-called Piskei Halacha for the partnership Minyanim, in Shum Haskama Mishum Talmud Chacham HaMukar Kapaisik. And this is the key thing. There isn't a single, it would be like overturning a major idea in any other field, from geography to physics to anything. Anything that has a recognized peer review and hierarchy of people who know things, and to upend it in terms of practice on the basis of some minor league authorities would be unthinkable in any other discipline. Why should it be different in Torah? And those, basically what we're saying also is that the Rabbanim in the previous generations didn't really care about women. They were misogynistic. They were really all part of this big problem, which is the patriarchy, and we're now going to fix it. And therefore, Rachmanu Yatzilenu. Okay, and he brings some more from Rav Soloveitchik in this vein. Leave out that paragraph. And they must have had a reason for why they didn't do that, and therefore just to upend a Masorah just like that is just unacceptable. Fine. Even if al pi halacha maybe there is no issa, but the very fact that what it has become and what it is and where it is coming from makes it treif, and that is Rav Shachter's point. There was a letter. I didn't bring it. I thought I'd printed it out. I did print it out, but I didn't bring it. There was a letter from which I'll send it to you. I'll put it on the group later because I don't want to do it. There's a Rav in London, the outspoken Chabad Rav. He's been around from a long time. His name is Rabbi Shochet, and he is a very what? Shochet. No, totally different. Totally different name. And he has at the time he used to write a column in one of the Jewish newspapers, and he's got a great sense of humor. He's smart, he's sharp, very articulate. He used to appear also on the BBC on the religious affairs program, and he was in the chief rabbi's cabinet. He's a good guy, and he wrote an article, I think in 2013, in the Jewish Chronicle when this furore broke out, and there are partnership minyanim in the UK, and he made the following point. One of the points that he made, which we have not made yet, which is, well, we've made it, but not in the way that he puts it, which is really important. He says the whole thrust of the discussion is, I have a right. We spoke about rights and obligations, right? I have a right to wear a talis, to be called up, and he makes the point, of course, I don't have a right to wear a talis, I don't have a right to be called up, I have obligations. But he says the basis of the whole discussion is wrong. In Judaism, to paraphrase, who was it, Kennedy? No, I can't remember who it was, Roosevelt. It's ask not what Hashem can do for you. In Yiddishkeit, it's not about what Hashem can do for you, it's about what you can do for Hashem. It's avodas Hashem. That is just another way of putting the chiyuvim. It's never about you. It is because you will be the one that benefits, but that's not the motivation. The motivation is avodas Hashem. What does Hashem want? The whole conversation is, what do women want? Who cares? But I would say the same thing about men. What do men want? Who cares? That's not the point. The point is, what does Hashem want? In order to find out what Hashem wants, of course, we consult, and we know through halacha, and there it's unequivocal. There is Did I give you this? Don't remember.
think so.
Can you check?
Nope.
I didn't give you that one yet.
The headline?
Okay, if I didn't, here you go. We'll go through some of it. We won't get through all of it because next week I want to move on to... So, there was a response, which I'm going to... There's a response which I don't want to do in depth, but one of the responses to this article by this psak by Rav Shachter came from a Rabbi Yisachar Katz, okay, who is associated with the Yeshivas Chovevei Torah, as it's called, right? Open Orthodoxy's institution. He's an interesting fellow. He learnt in Brisk, learnt in the same yeshiva that I did by Rabbi Avram Yeshua. He clearly is, he's smart, there's no question. He's smart, he's articulate. If you want to hear him, I'll send you the link. There is, he appeared on, I mean, you can go online and see some of the stuff that he's written. He appeared on David Lichtenstein's Headlines. You know Headlines, the podcast? No?
There's a book.
Yeah, well, so there's a guy called David Lichtenstein who's a Talmud Chacham. He's a billionaire, by the way. He's a hedge fund. He's got a hedge fund. Very wealthy, very seriously wealthy guy. Talmud Chacham. He's published this 3 volumes, Headlines.
Yeah, I just bought one of them.
Excellent. They're really good stuff. You can also go online. He has a podcast every week. I appeared on it once. For some reason, I got called up and I did something on it. But he's got one podcast with Yisachar Katz, and he tries to work him into a corner. And Yisachar Katz is very smart. He's very, very smart. And the idea is that they're trying to paint this open orthodoxy as really being orthodox, but just a bit more compassionate and a bit more. And he very much supports partnership Minyanim and all this sort of stuff. I mean, he's made statements about same-sex commitments and stuff like that, which, as far as we're concerned, and women rabbi stuff, which, as far as we're concerned, is clearly beyond the pale and is not considered orthodox. But he penned a response, which I have here, and there's some others, to this article by Rav Shachter. And then this is the response to the response, which we'll run through bits of it. Okay, this is by another Rav. You should know. He's got his own website. You'll see him sometimes on Torah Musings or Cross Currents or various other blogs. Rabbi Avram Gordimer, who is an RCA rabbi, so therefore probably identifies more as modern Orthodox, but is the big probably in the blogosphere and the internet, he's probably the most vocal and critical opponent of open orthodoxy in very clear and unequivocal terms. And this is his response to Yisachar Katz's challenge to Rav Shachter. Okay? Again, so this was, 2014. So you can see when this was happening. So he writes as follows: when challenging a world-eminent halachic master, be prepared. Nice try, but... These thoughts immediately come to mind upon reading the response of Rabbi Yisachar Katz, chair of the Department of Talmud at Yeshivas Chovevei Torah, to Rabbi Hershel Shachter's psak prohibiting partnership minyanim. Public prayer groups which identify themselves as orthodox, in which women lead parts of the public service, such as Kabbalas Shabbos and Psukei de Zimra. Let's look at Rabbi Shachter's psak and then turn to Rabbi Katz's response. All this requires detail and focus and cannot be presented summarily. We need to break it down by section. So we're actually going to miss out the Rav Shachter's psak bit because we've done it. Okay? Although you take it away with you and read up on it, and he does a good job of summarizing. Rav Katz's response, the details. Surprisingly, on the second page, yeah? Rabbi Katz does not muster any halachic arguments, nor does he directly address Rabbi Shachter's actual ruling. Rather, he focuses on his proofs and methodology, questioning and challenging and disputing Rav Shachter in these areas. Let's first look at some of the main objections raised by Rabbi Katz, after which we'll take a step back and see what the larger message is and where all of this is heading. As Rabbi Katz begins, the main initial objection in his response by arguing that as he understands the function in Rav Shachter's psak of the concept of going beyond that which is strictly required in serving Hashem, reflective of Ahavas Hashem, this concept, Rabbi Katz suggests, actually supports innovators and undermines Rabbi Shachter's psak. In other words, Rabbi Shachter's psak relies upon and validates a concept which inspires people to innovate as they seek out new ways to serve Hashem. This would seem to contradict the prohibitive stance of Rabbi Shachter's psak, argues Rabbi Katz. In other words, he's saying you're kind of contradicting yourself, right? Rabbi Katz misunderstands Rabbi Shachter's thesis, for Rabbi Shachter clearly explains that Avos Hashem provides the basis for accepting rabbinic authority and serving Hashem in other ways beyond the letter of the law. It does not provide license to introduce unchecked religious innovations. Suggesting that the concept of Ahavas Hashem supports religious innovations that are not vetted by Gedolei Hador is wholly unsupported by the presentation of Ahavas Hashem in Rav Shachter's Psak. So that's the first point dealt with. Okay? Rabbi Katz then asks how Rav Shachter can impute invalid motivations or any motivation to the innovators. In other words, how can you suggest, says Rabbi Katz to Rabbi Shachter, how can you suggest that these people are coming from a perspective of rejecting Torah? They are motivated by Ahavas Hashem. V'ani kirvas elikim li tov. And you've got it here. This is the response. Don't read it now, but this is, I'll give it to you. You can take it away. Not now. Don't read it now, there he says, I know the people that operate in these partnership minyanim. They are motivated by Yiras Hashem, and they just want to get closer to Hashem, and they're just looking for ways to do. And therefore, he's saying, how dare you, so to speak, Rabbi Shachter, to suggest or talk about motivation for these people? How do you know what they're doing? The reality is counters Rabbi Gordimer. The reality is that countless first-person articles and numerous interviews affirm that those who promote partnership minyanim largely maintain that our Masorah of male-led services is incorrect or lacking, with many feeling that the traditional male-led service is reflective of rabbinic bias that must be rectified or is antiquated. Hence, Rabbi Shachter is not imagining or conjuring up supposed invalid motivations. These motivations have been specifically expressed repeatedly by those behind partnership minyanim. No guesswork is needed. Brackets. Yes, many who participate in partnership minyanim may be serious, but the concept and establishment of partnership minyanim offends the motivational requirement as described by Rabbi Shachter. And if you dig a little bit on the internet, if you go onto, say, JOFA's website, the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance, or the various other Shira Chadasha, the various other groups or things that promote it, and you just look at their mission statements and the values, you see it's beyond doubt that it is very largely motivated by a dissatisfaction with Torah as it is understood in practice. Next, Rabbi Katz subsequently argues that the Tzedukim were not the first to challenge perceived inequity in Dinei Torah, because the Bnei Tzolach objected directly to Moshe Rabbeinu on this point. Therefore, there is biblical precedent for objection in Yerusha cases. Rabbi Katz's argument here has a fatal flaw. The Bnei Tzolach proffered their request to Moshe before halacha had been finalized. Moshe had the luxury of appealing to Hashem for consideration of the claim of Bnei Tzolach as the halacha was still in process. Many mitzvahs had not yet been commanded, and notable exceptions in mitzvah application had likewise not yet been presented. The case of Bnei Tzolach is wholly unrelated to modern-day objections to perceived halachic inequity with concomitant innovations in attempt to rectify or modify halachic practice once halacha was fixed and finalized millennia ago. So it's not, you hear that? It's not relevant. Taking issue with Rabbi Shachter's proof from the early Christians regarding the above topic, Rabbi Katz, because remember, if we saw with Rabbi Shachter quoted the Reform, and then he said even early Christians. So Rabbi Katz cites a different Talmudic source which indicates that mistreatment of women led to the founding of Christianity. Rabbi Katz argues that contrary to Rabbi Shachter's presentation, Chazal taught that the quest to prevent mistreatment of women was not a motivation identified with early Christians, for lack of such motivation actually resulted in apostasy to Christianity. With all due respect to Rabbi Katz, his argument entirely misses Rabbi Shachter's point. Yes, mistreatment of women is to be condemned in the harshest terms, and Talmudic sources thoroughly profess such. But Rabbi Shachter's point is that an invalid motivation, such as seeking to modify halacha due to a claim that it discriminates against women, is to be condemned. And it invalidates any innovative practices based on such a motivation. Rabbi Shachter was not addressing the need to protect women from mistreatment or the message of the separate Talmudic narrative that Rabbi Katz brought forth, because that's immaterial. If your motivation to change halacha is based on your misperceived understanding of mistreatment of women, then it's not valid. Next point, Rabbi Katz then challenges his assertion that one may not compromise your privacy or modesty unless required. That was Rabbi Shachter's point. We just did it just now, right? Rabbi Katz cites the biblical stories of David HaMelech dancing before the Oren HaBris, for which his wife Michal told him off, and she was punished, right? And the Jewish women in Egypt, who comforted and coaxed their wearied, enslaved husbands to intimacy using metallic fashion mirrors, conceiving and giving birth to multitudes of Jews. David and these women were voluntarily compromised their modesty in the service of Hashem, argues Rabbi Katz, and they were praised by Chazal for their actions. And that would appear to contradict Rabbi Schachter's thesis. You hear, there's these two challenges. The answer, Rabbi Katz again, is inaccurate. David was admonished by Michal for behaving in what she felt was an undignified manner, not for compromising his modesty. It was David's compromised kavod and not a lack of modesty which she protested. You hear that? So too, the women in the Aggadic narratives of the mirrors conducted themselves in private. They weren't intimate with their husbands in public. They conducted themselves in private and did not unnecessarily compromise their privacy and modesty. And therefore their mirrors were used, as you know, in the Kiyyur, because it was Adarab, it was Tznius, it was Kedusha, and the way they did it. Rabbi Schachter's point was that one should remain a private personality to the extent of that it is possible. Next point. Rabbi Katz concludes his critique of Rabbi Schachter's psak with a strong objection to his statement in the name of Rav Soloveitchik. It is prohibited to adopt practices which represent the undermining of Torah, such as deviationist movements, even if such practices present no other objections. Rabbi Katz says Zionism and modernity, which have legitimate religious manifestations, were in fact initially formulated as deviations from Torah. How did they come about? Initially, the first Zionists, there's no question, they were kofrim. They wanted it as antidote to Yiddishkeit, and Rabbi Katz claims that it was made kosher by Rav Kook, or etc. But they were later incorporated by Gedolei Torah into legitimate Torah paths. Torah im derech eretz, what Rav Hirsch did with modernity by incorporating it and, so to speak, kashering it. And what Rav Kook, he claims, did to Zionism, making it religious Zionism. And that, therefore, he asks, is the contradiction to Rav Schachter's thesis. On that, answers Rav Gordimer, Rav Katz misses the point of Rav Soloveitchik that Rav Schachter was presenting. The point is that specific customs and religious rites that represent the undermining of Torah may not be adopted. This includes women leading general prayer service, as well as conducting the service mainly in the vernacular, moving the bima for reading the Torah to the front of the shul, women laying tefillin, the use of an organ for services, and so forth. That which is not a religious rite or custom representing the undermining of Torah, such as political movements or secular studies, are not included in this prohibition. And we are not going to, we're out of time, we're not going to manage to finish it, but please take this away and read it up. As you can see, it gets pretty heated. There's another piece that I'm debating whether to give you, but I think next week we will move on to the issue of